right somewhere, anywhere here, we can do that. So I will come here and say public function join group, and then I will pass in the data, group ID, comma, user ID, like that. And then let's do that. Okay, so good there. Join group. So how do we join the group? Let's copy exactly what's here and paste it there. And then now I just need to create a query. So let's create our query here. I'm going to say query is equal to, though the escaping is better done here than on the outside, so we should have waited there and escaped the values from here. It's better practice that way. So if I go back to join.php, I don't need to do this escape here, because if you do escape a variable twice, that could become a problem. So let me remove that. It may add double slashes and like completely altering the data. So let me do it here instead. I will say group ID is equal to escape group ID, and then user ID is equal to escape user ID. Okay, then now we can create our query and say insert into. Now the thing is here, before we begin inserting, it is important that we create our database to see exactly what we will have in the database before we can even begin to write our query. So I'll put a semicolon there just to be safe. And so let's go to our database here, and let's create a new table for requests. So I've written some columns here that we need. So request table. So group requests, that's what it's going to be. We'll need an ID. We need a group ID to know. This ID is just used to read the data by the database. Group ID will be the group ID that you're requesting to join, and user ID is the user that's actually requesting the join. And then disabled will be used when the request is handled. We can disable it, or if we decline, either we decline or accept, we can disable it. Okay, so here, let me create a new from my book there on the database. I'll click new, and then I'll say group underscore requests. That's the name of the table. And then here we have ID, of course, and then we have group ID, yes, we have user ID, and then we have disabled. So the ID, because there will be a lot of requests, so we use big int, group ID, big int, same thing here, big int, then here tiny int. So tiny int will have a length of 1, the others can handle themselves just fine. Let's add a default value as 0 for disabled, because sometimes we may not have data for it. Then let's auto increment the ID and make sure it's the primary index, and that's about it. So we save. So there we have a new table. So let's add an index to each of these columns, because all of them will be used in the search. So we'll add an index. Everybody gets an index. Now, at this point, if you do want to know when the request was made, you can add the date. So that's entirely up to you, but I don't think it's necessary, but you can add a date there. It's easy to add, so if you want to, you can. Okay, so at this point, this is what we need. So in order to save this data, we just need to supply our group data, our user ID, and then make sure disabled is 0. And that's about it. So same thing here. if we want to know that our user already exists, let's create a query that will ask the question, because what we don't want is if a user keeps requesting to join and so on and so forth, we don't want to keep writing to the database every time. So we can limit their interaction, because otherwise they'll keep adding thousands of records which are useless. So let's do query is equal to in actual sense, we're making this operation, there's a word I'm looking for, it's idempotent, meaning it doesn't really affect anything if we repeatedly do it over and over. Okay, so here we're just going to say select all from group requests where user ID is equal to user ID, yes, and group ID is equal to group ID. But it's important to remember that this will be true sometimes when the user was, let's say user requested to be in a group at one time and then their offer was rejected. If they try to ask again, they try to request again, then they will be denied, because it will find a record actually exists even though it doesn't know that the record is disabled. So we have to make sure that we are even checking for the disabled feature. So disabled should be equal to 0. Oh, actually, wait a minute. So the thing here is let's remove disabled actually. So here I just want limit 1, because 1 record is enough. So I will get that one there, limit 1. Now the reason I removed the disabled is because we want to retrieve the record whether it's disabled or not. And yeah, that way when we want to re-enable it, instead of creating a new record, we can just change the 0 to a 1. Okay, so this is good. Now if I copy here and paste there, I will use the read function. And here, of course, I want to get this data. I will say check. We just call it check because we are checking to see. And then I'll say if check then that means we do have a record in there, so we'll do something different. But if we don't have a record, then we'll do something else. So in this case, we are just going to change the query. We don't need to have this db in here or there because we'll be repeating ourselves. We'll put this code here and also there, but we can just put it outside and just change the query in both of these instances. So here we say insert into group requests like this, and what we are inserting are some columns and values like this. Okay, so what columns are we inserting? Of course, it's one of them is group ID, the other one is user ID, and the other one is disabled. But disabled has a default feature of 0, a default value of 0, so we don't need to worry about it. So I'll put this here and just put commas here, and then put the $signs to make these variables like so. Okay, I think that actually does it. So we're inserting here. Now, if this is not true, then we just need to update. So I will copy this here and say update. Update group requests set disabled. Set disabled is equal to 0, where yes, where is important. So I'll copy this. Make sure we have just the first record. So say check is equal to check 0, just the first record. And then let me see, how does the data read from here? I have no idea. So okay, so there we go. Read data check. Wow, so I'm looking for somewhere where I read some information from the database. So clearly I don't have it here. Let me go to my where is this auto load data? Where is, oh, it's the connect, actually that's what it's called. So I just want to see what it returns the data as. So save or read. So read, fetch. Okay, so it's a row, an associative array. So back here, where are we? Let me close connect.php. Oh, I went up there. So disabled where, and we're going to say where ID, let's just use the ID, which is usually the simplest thing. ID is equal to check ID. I don't need that here. Ooh. Limit 1, like this. Okay, so this is the query to enable our row if it exists, and this is the query to create a new one if it doesn't, and then we save. So it is that simple to request a join. So let's give it a test run. So here I will refresh. Now we have page not found here, but let me go back so that we have a referrer so that we can be brought back here. So I will click here and say join group, and then I'm back here. So it looks like nothing happened, but a whole lot did happen. So let's go to browse and see if we have a record. And sure enough, we do have a record. So we have a group request right there. Okay, so pretty cool. Okay, so in the next video, we'll see how we can use this information to actually display here, because we don't need to show the user the join group anymore if they made a request already. Okay, so I'll see you in the next video.